You believe growth is supposed to feel good, that if you are the right path, life will reward you with clarity, confidence, and momentum. That belief is not just wrong. It is dangerous because real growth does not announce itself as progress. It disguises itself as discomfort, confusion, and quiet humiliation. And most people fail not because they are weak, but because they misinterpret what the early stages of growth are supposed to feel like. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are standing on a curve you do not understand. Jim Rohn called it the growth curve, but he never meant it as a motivational poster. It was a warning, a psychological map of why most humans plateau, retreat, or self-destruct just before their life could have changed forever. You think growth is linear. You think effort equals reward. You think if you do the right things long enough, the world will nod in approval. That assumption has quietly ruined more lives than failure ever has. Because the truth is this growth begins by taking things away from you. Your certainty, your identity, your social comfort, sometimes even your dignity. And if you don't understand that now, you will sabotage yourself later, right when the curve starts to bend upward. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The growth curve does not start with success. It starts with awareness. And awareness is violent. The moment you genuinely decide to grow, something unsettling happens. Your old habits stop working, but your new habits don't work yet. You exist in a psychological no man's land. You feel stupid doing things you're bad at. You feel arrogant remembering who you used to be. This is where most people quit. Not because the work is too hard, but because the identity cost is too high. Jim Rohn used to say that you don't get paid for time, you get paid for value. But what he didn't say explicitly is this: before you increase your value, you must confront how little value you currently offer. That realization is unbearable for the ego. So people escape. They call it being realistic. They call it accepting themselves. They call it not chasing money, not caring what others think, or being spiritual. But underneath those labels is fear, fear of the curve. Because the growth curve demands that you become temporarily worse at life in order to become permanently better. Stoic philosophers understood this long before Jim Rohn ever spoke on a stage. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the discomfort of self-discipline as a tax paid to nature. Epictetus warned that the moment you decide to improve, expect ridicule from others and from yourself. Growth isolates you before it elevates you. And that isolation is not accidental, it is a filter. But here's the part nobody tells you. The curve is not just external, it's psychological. In the beginning, effort produces no visible reward. Your discipline feels pointless. Your consistency feels invisible. Your sacrifices feel unacknowledged. This is where resentment is born. And resentment is the silent killer of potential. You start asking dangerous questions. Why am I doing this? Why do they get it so easy? Why hasn't anything changed? And if you let those questions fester, they mutate into self-betrayal. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The growth curve is asymmetric. The pain comes first. The reward comes later. And the delay is deliberate. Nature does this everywhere. Seeds rot before they grow. Muscles tear before they strengthen. Empires collapse internally before they are conquered externally. Machiavelli understood this pattern intimately. He knew that power is never accumulated in public view. It is built quietly, patiently, while others mistake silence for weakness. If you broadcast your growth too early, you expose yourself to sabotage, both from others and from your own ego. This is why real growth feels lonely. Not because people abandon you, but because you outgrow the conversations that once entertained you. Your jokes stop landing. Your complaints feel childish. Your old victories feel hollow. And here comes the most psychologically dangerous moment on the curve, the dip. This is where your effort increases, but your results decrease. Where your awareness makes you more conscious of your flaws. Where you feel less confident than when you knew less. Most people interpret this as regression. It is not. It is calibration. Jim Rohn warned that if you don't like how things are, change it, because you are not a tree. But he also understood that change feels like instability before it feels like control. The dip is where self-doubt becomes seductive. Because quitting suddenly feels like relief. You tell yourself you'll come back to it later. But later never comes. Because the curve only bends upward for those who stay long enough to absorb the pressure. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The growth curve exposes your relationship with time. Most people want tomorrow's life with today's identity. They want outcomes without transformation. But growth does not negotiate. If your habits remain the same, your future is already written, and it is painfully predictable. Rohn used to say that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. But failure, he said, is the same thing, just practiced unconsciously. The curve doesn't punish you for bad intentions. It rewards you for alignment. Alignment between what you say you want and what you do when nobody is watching. This is where dark psychology enters the conversation. Your mind is not designed to help you grow. It is designed to keep you safe, and safety prefers familiarity over progress. So your mind will generate excuses that sound reasonable. It will amplify fatigue. It will romanticize your past. It will distort your future, not because it hates you, but because it fears uncertainty. And growth is pure uncertainty. The people who make it past this stage don't defeat their fear. They make fear irrelevant by acting anyway. They don't wait for motivation. They build systems that function without it. But here is where the curve becomes cruel. The moment you start to improve, people around you begin to feel threatened, not consciously, psychologically. Your discipline becomes a mirror. Your silence becomes an accusation. Your progress destabilizes their identity. So they test you. They mock you jokingly. They remind you of who you used to be. They tempt you with comfort disguised as loyalty. This is not malice. It is self-preservation. And if you don't recognize it, you will shrink to make others comfortable. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The growth curve eventually demands separation. Not everyone can come with you. Not everyone should. This is where guilt becomes your enemy. You feel guilty for changing, guilty for wanting more, guilty for leaving familiar ground. But guilt is just attachment wearing a moral mask. Stoics warned against living by the expectations of the crowd. Machiavelli warned against confusing popularity with power. Jim Rohn warned that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Different language, same law. If your environment doesn't change, your trajectory won't either. And this is where the curve finally begins to turn. Subtly, quietly. You don't wake up successful. You wake up competent. Your decisions feel lighter. Your reactions slow down. Your standards rise without effort. You stop chasing validation because you trust your process. This is dangerous for other people because now you are no longer predictable. You no longer react emotionally. You no longer need approval. And that is when leverage appears. Opportunities find those who are prepared, not those who are desperate. Respect gravitates toward consistency, not intensity. But don't celebrate yet, because there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The upper part of the growth curve is where arrogance can destroy you faster than ignorance ever could. You start believing the curve will always go up. It won't. Growth is cyclical. Plateaus return. Resistance evolves. The difference now is awareness. You no longer panic when things slow down. You recognize the signal. Another curve is beginning. Another shedding. Another recalibration. This is where mastery lies, not in endless ascent, but in the willingness to repeat the process without resentment. Jim Rohn didn't teach motivation. He taught responsibility. He understood that personal development is not about becoming better than others, but about becoming better than you were yesterday, even when yesterday felt easier. The final stage of the growth curve is quiet authority. You don't need to announce your discipline. Your life speaks for you. You don't argue your worth. You demonstrate it. You don't chase outcomes. You build causes. And here is the paradox that brings us back to the beginning. The moment growth starts to feel comfortable is the moment it stops working, which means the discomfort you are currently feeling is not a sign of failure. It is proof that the curve is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. You thought growth was supposed to feel good. That belief was dangerous because real growth feels like becoming someone you don't fully recognize until one day you can't recognize who you used to be. So here is your call to action. Not to work harder, not to dream bigger, but to stop mislabeling discomfort as defeat. Respect the curve. Stay when it gets quiet. Stay when it gets lonely. Stay when your ego begs you to quit. Because the life you want is not at the beginning of the curve. It is waiting on the other side of the pain you are currently trying to escape. And if this video starts over right now, remember this. You believe growth was supposed to feel good. Understanding the curve does not exempt you from its demands. It sharpens them because now ignorance is no longer your enemy. Comfort is. Once you've climbed far enough to taste momentum, the danger shifts. Early on, the curve tests your patience. Later, it tests your character. This is where most successful people quietly decay. They stop growing but keep performing. They maintain the image while abandoning the process. They confuse stability with mastery. Jim Rohn warned about this stage in subtle ways. He said that income rarely exceeds personal development. But what he implied was more unsettling. When personal development stalls, income and life eventually follows. It just takes time. And time is deceptive because the upper levels of the growth curve are comfortable enough to numb urgency. You're not failing. You're doing fine. And fine is lethal. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Growth does not only require discipline. It requires the courage to dismantle what is already working. This is the hardest psychological move a human can make. It is one thing to change when you are desperate. It is another to change when you are respected, stable, and rewarded. This is why most people peak early and coast forever. They build a small kingdom and defend it like a dying empire. They reject new ideas not because they're bad, but because they threaten identity. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He wrote that men rise by innovation but fall by preservation. What once made you powerful will eventually make you obsolete if you cling to it too long. The growth curve turns vicious here because it will ask you to become a beginner again. to feel clumsy, to lose status temporarily, and your ego will fight back with everything it has. It will say, why risk what you've built? Why start over? Why prove yourself again? And if you listen, the curve flattens. Not immediately, quietly. This is where stagnation disguises itself as wisdom. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Every level of growth demands a new relationship with suffering. Early suffering is chaotic. Late suffering is intentional. At the higher stages, pain is no longer accidental. You choose it. You choose discipline over ease, silence over validation, long-term leverage over short-term applause. This is where Stoicism stops being philosophy and becomes survival. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for motivation. He wrote them to remind himself not to decay under power, because power softens before it corrupts, and growth without pressure creates fragility. The curve now tests something far more subtle than work ethic. It tests restraint. Can you stop when you could indulge? Can you stay grounded when you could dominate? Can you remain a student when others call you a master? This is rare, and this rarity is why true authority feels almost invisible. The people at this level don't announce their ambition. They don't explain their discipline. They don't argue with resistance. They move quietly, decisively. But don't misunderstand, this is not peace. This is controlled tension, because there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The growth curve never ends. It only tightens. The higher you climb, the smaller your margin for error becomes. Early mistakes are forgiven by obscurity. Late mistakes are amplified by visibility. This is why humility is not a virtue, it is a requirement. Jim Rohn used to say that if you don't design your life, someone else will. At higher levels, that someone else is often your own success. Your routines become rigid, your thinking narrows, your curiosity dulls. And suddenly the curve starts pulling downward, not dramatically, gradually. This is the danger of believing you've made it. Because growth is not a destination. It is a posture, the posture of perpetual refinement. This is where most people fail silently. They don't collapse, they calcify, and the world moves past them without permission. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The growth curve does not reward morality. It rewards alignment with reality. Good intentions do not bend the curve. Hard work alone does not bend the curve. Only correct action, sustained over time, does. This is why some unethical people succeed, and why some virtuous people struggle. Reality does not negotiate with beliefs. Machiavelli was hated for saying this openly. Rohn was respected for saying it gently. Stoics accepted it without emotion. The curve is indifferent. And once you accept that, you stop feeling personally attacked by difficulty. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this demanding from me? That shift changes everything. Because now, failure becomes information. Pain becomes feedback. Resistance becomes direction. This is the mindset of those who never truly plateau. They don't chase motivation. They refine alignment. They don't fear starting over. They fear stopping. And here is where the curve reveals its final lesson. Growth is not about becoming more. It is about becoming precise, more disciplined with your time, more selective with your energy, more ruthless with distractions. At this stage, subtraction matters more than addition. You don't ask, what should I do next? You ask, what must I remove? This is why minimalism appears at the top of every serious life, not as a trend, but as a necessity. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Once you see the curve clearly, you can no longer unsee it. You will notice it in others, in relationships, in careers, in entire civilizations. You will see who is rising, who is coasting, and who is declining long before the results appear. This knowledge is isolating, because you cannot warn people without threatening their identity. So you learn silence. And silence becomes your strength. You let people choose comfort. You choose the curve again and again. This repetition is the real price of growth, not effort, not discipline, but consent. Consent to be uncomfortable repeatedly. Consent to be misunderstood often. Consent to outgrow versions of yourself you once loved. And now we return to where we began. You thought growth was supposed to feel good. You thought once you reached a certain level, the struggle would stop. That belief was dangerous because growth does not end suffering. It refines it. And the moment you stop climbing the curve is the moment the curve starts dragging you backward. So when this video loops, hear the first sentence again with new ears. You believed growth was supposed to feel good.